So today we're sitting around talking with Ara about mental toughness, and we wanted to talk about something a little bit different today. We talk about mental toughness all the time and how to become more mentally tough and how to drive further and faster and accomplish your goals. Today I wanted to sit down with Ara and talk about lifelong mental toughness. So how do you sustain high performance over the long haul? And the reason I wanted to talk about that is I think for a lot of people, it's easy to be mentally tough when you know it's only for today or you know it's only for the next hour. But with your background and your experiences, just wanted to pick your brain on what's worked for you to be successful over the long haul when it comes to mental toughness.
Yeah, awesome. Turning it into a lifestyle, in other words.
Yeah.
Not that I've achieved that, but yeah, certainly
Yeah.
what I've learned over the years.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, I think it'll be really helpful for people, especially going through the stuff that we went through in 2020 and 2021, and the pressures are coming down on people more than ever from all different directions in life, and so just keeping people encouraged year after year after year.
Yeah, I think when I think about that too, is one of the things that we've tried, and it is hard. You're right, in some of the videos we put out, because the intent is to help folks and help everybody understand getting past the single event form of mental toughness. I just got to get through this thing or that thing or that thing, versus transitioning into where it just kind of becomes a lifestyle. Everything I do is the same. And so how I approach this particular challenge in my life isn't really different than I approach that challenge in my life. It's just all part of how I approach everything in my life. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I get, my kids make fun of me all the time, and it's like, well, Dad, of course you can do that. You're an airborne ranger, right? But yeah. The reality is, and I always tell people, but no, I'm not. I mean, yes, I was, but I wasn't born that way. There was a point where it just became a little bit more my lifestyle to go down that road. Mm-hmm. And so it's not any easier for me necessarily than it is for anybody else. It's just that over time, I've learned the habits and just studied a lot of good people that are tougher and better than I am, and picked up their habits of trying to make it a lifestyle and then maybe not sliding back, no matter how easy and tempting it is to slide back, if that makes sense. So this will be fun to talk about.
Yeah, I think it'll be really interesting. And,
yeah, it'll be cool.
When you think about like the stuff you've been through, what do you think was the biggest factor of that sustained high performance?
There's probably several, but I think I gotta think about the question. I don't know if there's any one thing. I guess there is one thing. Trying to never take the natural, easy way. Mm-hmm. And this drives certain people crazy because there are always easy ways and hard ways to do things. And the hard way is not always the right way. And I'm not saying that it is. But it's getting into the habit of never accepting the easy way. And so, for example, in the workouts, right? And we set a goal of 12 reps or 15 reps or whatever it is. And it is so easy to get to 8 and 9. Most people, some people will eke out number 10, and then, a small percentage will eke out that number 11. But it's that very special crew that say, no, I'm still gonna go to 12, even though my head's gonna explode, and even though every ounce of my body is telling me I need to stop at 11, unless there's an injury risk, it's saying, no, I'm not accepting the 11, I'm gonna go to the 12. Yeah. And constantly doing that in just about everything we do. Over time, that builds a habit that anytime you go to 11, you're not satisfied. Mm-hmm. And so that is just a habit forming. And so whether it is decisions in life as far as whether I'm gonna get up early or sleep in a little extra, whether it is I'm going to deal with an issue in my home that is an unpleasant issue versus kicking that can down the road, whether it is dealing with an issue at work that's an unpleasant issue versus kicking that can down the road and hoping it gets fixed. There's an easy, natural way to go, and sometimes that's the right way. But a lot of times there's a harder way that might be a better way, and it's the willing to say, no, I'm going the harder way and I'm not accepting less. Yeah. And over time, that just becomes the default setting, because as you do it more and more and more and more, you just naturally gravitate towards that, to the point that you drive everybody around you crazy.
Yeah.
But the reality is, for sustained performance, you have to be able to be willing to go to that extra mile. And if it's not called for, then you make the decision then, okay, today I don't need to do that, right? I can do the 11. But at the same time, it's a decision, not a default. The default is I'm going to 12. Wisdom might tell me to do 11 because I've got an injury. Wisdom might tell me, you know what? This is not the right timing. Wisdom might lead me back to the 11 or the 10, but my default is 12 until wisdom talks me out of it. Yeah. Versus my default is 10 or 11 until somebody yells at me and talks me out of it, if that makes any sense, and takes me to the 12.
No, that's super helpful. And that was definitely something I wanted to talk about today, was like expanding on that point. There seems to be mental toughness, and then there's mental toughness that you're proud of. So I see a lot in you where, because one example would be in some of the younger individuals from a mental toughness standpoint in the gym. Every now and then you see the scenario of like, I'm going to bury this guy. I'm going to bury this guy by 50 calories because I'm feeling really mentally tough today. But then as you see that contrast with younger individuals in the gym that are mentally tough for a long period of time, you see their mindset shift, and it's I'm going to do the best I can, and then I'm going to help the guy next to me. Yeah. And that's definitely something I've seen in you. How important do you think taking care of others as you're mentally tough and doing work that you're proud of is over the long haul?
That's going to come down to your why. If I'm getting mentally tough because I want to be mentally tough for me, then you will always be stuck in that selfish mode. But if the why that's driving you is bigger than you, then chances are it'll be easier for you to not get wrapped into that selfish mode. We all struggle with that. We all struggle with pride. We all struggle with that tendency of selfishness of, okay, I'm better than this guy, I want to bury him. We all go through those, but it's always going to come back down to that why that we've talked about so many times. When I first started, for me, it was always, initially anyway, it was always about leading soldiers. It was that blazing fear of letting my soldiers down or having a soldier get hurt or die because I wasn't ready. That was my biggest fear in life. If I had a commander who said, you know, I had a commander once that said, all right, I want all my subordinate commanders, you tell me what keeps you up at night. And that was what kept me up at night. What kept me up at night was the fear of failing my soldiers. So for me, all my mental toughness was about being the best I could be as far as being a leader. That made it easier to transition that now naturally to help somebody that's struggling, because it never was about me in the first place. It wasn't about my bragging rights. It was about me being able to make them better, because that's why I did it. At some point in life, that why is what crosses us over from selfishness to selflessness. When I start doing this because I want to do it for my family, I want to be a strong leader for my family, and I want my family to have a good example to follow. When I do this because I want to be a great example at work, and I want to have an impact at work and impact those around me. When I do it because even in the gym, right? I want to have an impact on those in the gym, and I want people to be inspired by my story, whether I'm weak or strong, however it is. When that becomes my motivational drive, then the mental toughness naturally spreads to all those around you. One of the things that when I went through the whole ALS process, and we thought I had ALS, and when I came out of it at the end, and you know, it was one of the things the Lord really impressed on my heart was, what do you want to do with the rest of your life? And you know, I was 50 years old, and for the first time I'm thinking, well, what do I want to do tomorrow? Because I hadn't had a tomorrow up until that day. And again, it went right back to that original thing. I want to have an impact on as many people as I possibly can. That makes it a lot easier for me to not care whether I am strong or weak, because it's not about me. And I keep getting weak. I'm 53 years old. I have multiple injuries, but it's not about me. It's about leading my family. It's about having an impact on the folks around me the best I can with whatever little abilities God gives me, which means in my weakest points, I can still have a positive impact. In my strongest points, I can have a positive impact. And that why now fuels everything else, and there is no quitting. The soldiers that make it through some amazingly difficult combat experiences, almost inevitably, the stories come out. They weren't doing it for themselves, they were doing it for those around them. And that's why they were able to do these amazingly heroic things. They'll tell you, I'm not a hero, but I couldn't leave my buddies stranded. And that is, again, the central theme, I think, to true mental toughness, is when you turn that corner, it becomes about those you influence, really about those whom you serve. At that point, it'll be a lot easier to not take the easy route, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think for us at Mountain Tough, it's kind of cool because we get to see that why fuel your fire. So a lot of people that watch us online or listen may not know that the stuff we know. So we know that, you know, you can work 14, 16 hours a day. You never seem to slow down. You're doing a tremendous amount of work at Mountain Tough. You're also doing leadership consulting and helping with other small businesses. You're also pastoring a church. So for us, it's pretty cool to witness firsthand that how much energy that why brings you, that the why of impacting as many people as possible. From our standpoint, we can sit here and watch that why kind of light that fire, and that's pretty cool. For a long time, we thought you were powered by orange Gatorade.
Pretty much am. That's the myth.
One of the questions I had for you is, so I've seen, from a mental toughness standpoint, I've seen a couple things from this concept of we all have this voice in our head when we're going through hard things. So we all have this personal coach that if I'm doing something really hard in the gym or really hard in the mountains, I'm talking myself through it in my head. One thing I've noticed is some people have a really negative voice and some people have a really positive voice, their own personal coach. And as I've gotten older, for sure, my personal coach inside of my head has gotten a lot more positive. And I was just curious, do you experience that? Are you coaching yourself through your difficult times?
Yes. I am probably a negative coach. We've always talked about this. You're a glass half full guy. I'm a glass half empty guy. And I am definitely a very negative coach, especially on myself. I don't think it's a positive trait. There are positive aspects to it, but it's a very negative trait. That is something I have to work hard. And in my case, my faith helps me with that because I have to talk to the Lord about that all the time, because I will take a very negative look at things, a very negative perspective. I'll get very frustrated if I can't do something or finish something I started. I'm that guy that will beat myself up over every little thing that I don't do well, or as well as I think I should have done. And that's part of releasing some of that ego. And that's what he's been teaching me over time is, listen, you're not in control of this, I'm in control of this. The more you get tied around the more you pole vault over each little mouse poop that isn't going the way you think it should go, the more your ego is getting in the way. And so for a big part of me of learning that was learning to lean on him, and literally I've got to fight those demons. So again, for me, it's a conversation with the Lord, and it's almost every day, it's multiple times a day, of fighting those demons out and staying focused. The easiest way of accomplishing that, and the way I did it in a lot of places I was to get out of my head and get around people, if that's an option. One of the things that COVID is doing is it's killing that as an option. But for me, it's always, okay, I've got to get out. If it meant getting out of my office and finding some soldiers, if it meant getting out of the house and coming and hanging around a Mountain Tough a little bit, it's getting out into the environments where I serve. I remember I was having a really, really, really rough day, and I walked into church. I was going to preach, and I was having a bad morning. I'd had a bad prep week, and I just I wasn't there. And normally, I'd be in my office sweating it out. But I was like, all right, forget it. And I just walked out of my office. People were starting to come in, and I sat down with a couple of folks in the congregation that I knew were struggling. And I just wanted to sit with them. And as I got to sit and be with them, it's like I just got re-energized. All that stuff was gone, and I was ready to go. And sometimes that's what we need to do. Re-engage with your family, Sometimes it means re-engaging with somebody outside. It might be a phone call, it might be a text, it might be a coffee with somebody, it might be getting back into an environment that you've come out of that used to fuel you, but it is getting out of your head, if possible, and getting back into what the Lord has given you an opportunity to serve, or where He's given you the opportunity to serve. And for me, that's, again, it's been a lifelong for me of coming out of my head. And literally, I'd go out and find soldiers. I'd go down and sit in the orderly room and listen to them, throwing stuff at each other. And I wasn't even part of the conversation. Just being around them refueled that energy and got the negative thoughts back out. So,
yeah, I experienced the same thing, like just having a really bad day or feeling really down. And sometimes you don't even want to be around people, but every single time, if I'm going through some hard things and I come in and work out with the guys, it's like a night and day difference afterwards, how much better you feel, just that energy they bring you.
Yes, but don't, and you're doing it, and exactly what you're saying is right. One thing I want to add to it is the mistake a lot of people make is they go find somebody that's like them, and then they start spilling the negative thoughts back and forth. Yeah. That's a self-licking ice cream cone that's going nowhere. Yeah. So make it a positive connection. Don't surround yourself with the other guy that's also half empty today and is having the same issues, and both of you are commiserating, because that's never going to get either one of you out of the funk. Yeah. You probably got to find the other person that needs your positivity, needs your help, or you just want to be around. Yeah. And it's just, we're getting outside. So that is a mistake I try to warn people not to make, because I've made it before too, is we tend to gravitate towards people that are the same as us. And so if you are feeling grumpy or got that grumpy disposition, you're going to find somebody else that's also struggling with the same things you're struggling with. Just make it worse. And it just makes it worse. Yeah. Neither one can pull the other one out of that ditch. So at some point, you need to surround yourself with people who aren't necessarily going down the same road, or that you are helping to pull out of that ditch, in which case it forces you to fight your demons so you can help them fight theirs. Yeah. And that's always been a help to me, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. I still think the negative personal coach in your head versus the positive is pretty fascinating. One reason that I'm really interested in that one is a lot of times you'll find the most mentally tough people in the world often have a story of like a really difficult childhood or a really traumatic event they had younger in life, and they're using that terrible experience they went through to fuel their like physical feats older in life, and it works extremely well. And so a lot of the people that you see doing crazy things now are fueled by these really negative experiences. But then a lot of times it's really difficult for them to sustain that, like over 20 years.
That's the thing. Yeah. So this is huge, actually, and I'm really glad you brought it up. So I have had one of those childhoods, and there's no doubt about it. There's a lot of energy you can get out of, I think that's a big part of why I even became an airborne ranger, was because of that childhood. That is okay for a period of time. But at some point, that source of energy is going to go. It's just not sustainable. Yeah. Anger and sometimes those previous experiences and the fuel they provide can be positive. I mean, again, sometimes my intensity is fueled simply by the fact that I'm frustrated that I'm not doing everything I want to do, and sometimes that's probably a good thing, because it keeps me from resting on my laurels, and and keeps me from being prideful, or it launches me forward. But if I stay in that place, I'm just going to get angry and bitter, and there's not enough there. At some point, the fuel has to shift to something more positive. Yeah. It can stay that way for a number of years. I was known as an angry guy. My nickname was Darth Vader, because I was fueled by anger. I was fueled by bitterness. I was fueled by a lot of things in my past life that were not positive and were still driving that energy. But there came a point in life, especially as I started to have a family, as I started to get older, that was no longer a fuel that was really bringing out the right kind of energy. And it needed a shift. In my case, that's when the Lord broke me and got hold of me. But at some point, and there's an obstacle course at West Point, and that the students have to do. And it's funny because I use this obstacle course as an example. You have to go across they're pull-up bars, and it's just simply pull-up bars with the bars that hold them up, but you have to walk across the pull-up bars on the top. And the hard part is the supports are just far enough apart that you can't reach the next one while holding on to the one before. So it's still just a little pull-up bar is all you're standing on. You've got to get bar to bar to bar to bar as you walk down it. And it's really stressful because you're only maybe 8 feet off the ground. I mean, that's it. It feels a lot worse. You're not gonna get killed if you fall, but it's scary, and it's very hard. You freeze up there because the only way to get to the next pole is to release the last. And too many people cannot release the last chapter. And maybe in another video, or maybe even here, we can talk about releasing that last chapter. But if you can't release the last chapter, you can hold on there for a while, and you can stretch, and you can stretch, and you can stretch. But at some point, if you're going to get progress and move forward along the poles, you have to release the last chapter. And the fuel has to come not because of what happened in the last chapter, but the fuel comes because you're pressing forward to the next. That shift in mindset now allows you to keep pressing forward. Otherwise, you can only go as far as you can stretch, and then eventually that steam is going to run out, and you hit a point in your life where, and I did too, where it's, okay, what am I doing and why am I doing this, right? I was doing this because I was fueled by those previous experiences. Well, that doesn't fit now. So the sooner you can break that hold, the better it's going to be. And sometimes those experiences, well, I'll come back to that later. So that was just,
No, that's super helpful. So do you think you were mostly fueled by a negative personal coach getting through Ranger School?
Oh yeah, I was a driven Muldoon. I was also very focused on, by then, wanting to lead my soldiers. So I had these two dynamics going. I had this negative childhood, and I was, I remember I was on this little Ranger Club thingy in high school, and I was definitely a guy picked on pretty heavily. I was sent away to military school because my home life had become non-tenable. So they sent me off to military school. And if anybody's gone to military school, it's like a reform school. It's not really. I used to sleep with. I had a room to myself. I used to sleep on the top bunk. I had empty cans stacked in front of the door, and a broomstick by my bed, so that I could have early warning if somebody came in, and I could beat them off with the broomstick. So that's the environment, right? So but that's, it's military school. It's just the nature of it. But the reality was, as I went through my senior year, we had this little Ranger Club, and I remember thinking I could never be a Ranger. But eventually the fuel started to come. A lot of it was fueled by that negative perspective. I got laughed at, and I didn't get treated as well as I could have. So then eventually that fueled this other end of the spectrum, where all of a sudden I started doing more than anybody would have expected me to do. And then that anger just got more and more and more intense. My mom knew me as an angry guy. Everybody knew me as an angry guy. I carried it, and I was not failing anything. But I also wasn't forgiving with anybody else either. Again, Darth Vader was very well earned. But at the same time, my wife was the beginning of the transition to where it became a little bit more of a positive fuel. My mom said she started to see me smile for the first time when I met my wife later on. The Lord was softening me over time. But like I said, that negative fuel did push me through Ranger School. But there was already this drive to be the best I could be as far as being a lieutenant. So the positive was there. It was just equally fueled by the negative. At some point that shifted, and it shifted for me in 2001. It shifted to where the negative was still there, and I still went through periods of being fueled by the negative. But for the most part, I was looking at the next bar versus fighting the release of the last one. And that's where things really started to change for me. As I stopped, those things in my past became molding events. They became shaping events. They became amazing lessons learned. And now they're stories that I can tell and use to help other people, because now they're part of my journey. That is now not baggage. It's a shaping part of my journey that helps me reach for the next pole. And in the next poll now, this is a really useful part of my journey, whereas before, it probably wasn't a healthy part of my journey, if that makes sense. Now I think I have a healthier perspective on it. We have a Chihuahua, and I tell people the story because, so my wife and that Chihuahua are very well attached. Everywhere she goes, that Chihuahua follows her. It's her dog. So my wife never goes anywhere, but a couple years ago, my wife went to Panama for like 3 weeks, or like a month, right? She had to go, she hadn't seen her family in years, so she's going back to Panama, and that dog was freaked out. So it just didn't sit well with that dog. She just couldn't imagine being separated from her master. She'd never been separated for a day, let alone 3-4 weeks. But that dog's crate was in the mudroom, and so she saw my wife packing the suitcases and me helping her. But then what she really saw was the morning that she's heading out in the flight, she's in the mudroom, she sees me packing those suitcases into the car, putting my wife in the car, taking her to the airport. She doesn't know I'm going to the airport. And then I come back without my wife and without the suitcases. So that dog, for the 3 or 4 weeks that my wife was gone, did not really want to come near me because she thought I had done something to my wife. Then I packed my suitcase because on the tail end of the trip, I was going to fly down, spend a couple days, visit with her family, and then come back with her. And so then the dog sees me packing my suitcase, and the next thing you know, the next morning, the dog sees me leave the house through the mudroom with my suitcases, and then I don't come back, and she's stuck with the kids. And so we're thinking everything's fine. We come back, everything's normal, the dog's good. A year later, we're packing up for a trip. The dog's going to go with us. No. It wasn't even that. We were going to Reno.
Sheep show.
The sheep show. And my suitcase was in the same place in the bedroom being packed, and it's laying there. And I remember I'm just off doing something, and my wife is like freaking out. Ara, the dog is dying again. And she's there. She's sick. She won't eat. She's lost all. Again, we're like emergency vet. Chihuahuas, when they don't eat, they die fast. Their blood sugar drops. We're giving her syrup and doing all that kind of stuff, and we can't figure out what's wrong with the dog. And no matter what we did, it goes on for hours. I mean, we get her back. She curls back up, and she's just done. And I said, you know what? Move the suitcases to the other side of the house. Just move the suitcases away. My wife was like, why? I said, just do it. And she went and hid them in another room. And within an hour, that dog was totally fine. And I said, do you have any idea? That dog does not even realize. She is still traumatized by something that happened over a year ago and doesn't even realize it. It's there haunting her, and she doesn't even know it's there. And now it's taking her down without her even knowing why she's going down. She's just facing this same trauma she faced a year ago.
Now, earlier on, you mentioned the story about ALS. And for most of our listeners and viewers, they haven't heard that story. A lot of the local mountain toughers have. We've talked about it. Can you describe that experience for our viewers?
I haven't told the story very much. So I went through a period of time coming out of the military, especially with my background in the military. You don't realize how much you've beat your body up over time. So, when I went to the VA and I was filling out my paperwork, I remember they saw the designator there that says 5 Sierra and an Airborne Ranger, and they saw I'd been a Ranger Battalion. So the clerk kind of chuckled, and he reached behind him, put out this whole heavy stack, and puts it in front of me. He says, sir, you're going to need that. And I'm like, what is all that? He goes, trust me, you're going to need it. And so over the years following my retirement, I mean, there was just a year after year after year where I was just taking a beat down physically. And hip discs blowing out and hip going out, all the kinds of things happening. But one of those, towards the tail end of it, was they thought that I had ALS. And so here they diagnosed me with it. They didn't really want to tell me that's what it was, but they kind of figured that's what it was. So they said, we're going to send you to the Mayo, and you got to go to the next level of care. But I had this 3 or 4 month window where I didn't know, because I couldn't get into the Mayo for 4 months, I think it was. So I knew that's what they thought I had. I couldn't get an answer until I went to the Mayo. So I had this 4 month window where, from my perspective and from everything we thought, I've got ALS, and I'm destined for just a few months left for life.
4 to 6 months.
4 to 6 months, yeah. And so, you know, I had younger kids at home. We had not in any way been prepared for this, and it really, really beat me up. It took me down really hard, and I went through the entire grieving process. It was hard because I didn't want to tell my family. I didn't know what to tell my family. I didn't have it confirmed yet, so I didn't want to say anything. I didn't even want to tell my wife, but she was wise enough to figure it out. I couldn't tell the church because my kids are sitting in the pews, so I couldn't say anything to the church. I'm still preaching, you know, every Wednesday, twice on Sunday, and I'm preaching about the Lord and the Lord's word, but inside I was dying. Outside I was fine, but inside I was just being eaten alive, and my faith in the Lord was dying out and all kinds of things. I was angry, I was bitter, and every day I would pray, but there was a lot of anger coming out in that prayer. And I remember it was about 2 weeks before going to the Mayo, and I had just been, again, just carrying myself through this best I could. And I remember I got down to pray again, and I've been reading every book I can get my hands on because trying to find something to help me, and nothing did, because there's just very little. This came down to something I needed to deal with the Lord and me. There was nothing else that was going to come in there. And I was praying that night like I always do, and I did my initial, maybe a little bit of venting, but I finally broke. It was months into this. I was literally 2 weeks away from going to the Mayo, and I finally broke. And I had read something that had talked about the Lord's will in your life. And I was bawling my eyes out, and I was on my knees. And I said, and I meant it. For the first time, I truly meant it. Lord, I don't like this, but if this is your will for me, I'm okay with it. And I genuinely was. For the first time, I was. And I said, but I don't have the strength to do it. And for the first time in months, I felt him stroking my neck again. And it changed my relationship with him. It was never the same after that. I had turned a corner to where I had learned to trust him with everything precious in my life. And the hardest part going through that was that I had not given him my family. Because that was the fear, right? If I go, what's going to happen to my family? And by doing that, I had finally entrusted him with that which was most precious to me. Not just me, but my kids and my wife. And that was a huge turning point. That gave me the strength to have a relationship with him that allowed me to understand that things are much bigger than me, and he is much bigger than me, and he is much greater than me, and his plan is much bigger than me. But what it really did was help me submit and really have a sweet relationship with the Lord. And when we went to the Mayo, I literally walked in the doctor's office. I was still freaked out. I mean, I knew I was good with the Lord, but nonetheless, I was still scared. And we're driving to Rochester, Minnesota. You know, my wife, like, while I'm driving, so we keep going, my wife feeds me yogurt. And I remember thinking, this is how it's going to be the end of my life. She's going to be feeding me yogurt until I die. This is horrible. And I get in there and I see the doc, the neurologist, and he does his exam. He asked me, he said, Ara, do you know why you're here? I said, yes. He goes, tell me why you're here. And I couldn't say it. I said, well, I'm here because I've been diagnosed with ALS. He goes, yes, that's exactly why you're here, because you've been diagnosed with ALS. But honestly, I don't think that's what you have. We're going to run through our test. I didn't hear anything else after that. I was like, really? Seriously? And it was just, whew. My wife said, I slept for the first time in months. The Lord had confirmed in my heart that it was his ball weeks ago, but I still hadn't been, you know, I still didn't have the peace. I was still scared. And then as I went through all the tests, one of the appointments I had was with a therapy guy. And same thing, he started the conversation the same way. He said, Ara, do you know why you're here? I said, yes. And I hadn't seen the neurologist for the follow-up yet, so I didn't know fully what the test results were. I said, yes. He says, why are you here? I said, well, they think I have ALS. He goes, yes, that's why you're here. Your appointment with me is to talk about end-of-life care and how you are, to show you how to use the wheelchair and all the things you're going to need for end-of-life. And so you can understand what's going to happen. And he goes, but we looked at the test results today, and we don't think that's what you have. I was like, oh, man. I said, so what the heck is it? And so he said, well, let's play around a little bit, and let's take a look. He said, there's definitely a lot of damage to your leg, the permanent damage from all the injuries to your back. So there's definitely some permanent damage there. He said, you know what? I'm betting your hip is a mess too. And that's one of the things they started playing around with things, and they said, okay, we got to replace your right hip, probably your left hip too, but for now, the immediate thing is replace the right hip to see if we can figure out how to deconstruct everything. But the bottom line for me is when I came out of that thing in August and I hit the ground back here, for the first time, I had a life, a tomorrow that up until that point I did not have.
Yeah.
Again, it was August, my birthday's in August, and I remember sitting on the porch thinking, okay, and it was almost like the Lord said, what do you want to do with the rest of your life?
Yeah.
And I was like, I didn't know I had the rest of my life.
Yeah.
And we went back to that initial motivation. What is it you want to do? And I had written it down in the darkest whale's belly, what I wanted to do and the impact I wanted to have.
Yeah.
And we went back to that. And I said, Lord, I want to have as big an impact as you will allow me to make with the time you have left me to make it.
Yeah.
And he said, giddy up.
That's cool.
And so that's why I run 14, 16, 17 hours a day, because it's not me. I mean, it's my fuel is to find every door that opens up that allows me to impact somebody else. Then I don't have an explanation for it. I'm just going through it and seeing where the Lord takes it. If it's not what he wants, he'll shut it. But so far, he just opens one and the other and the other. And my role now is to keep finding a way to fuel that fire. Anyway, I'm sorry.
Well, I do want to unpack that a little bit to the point we made earlier, or the question we had earlier. So people that are driven from negative experiences and people that are driven from a positive coach in their head. So both can be successful and both can get through very difficult things. And there's so much difficult things happening in the world right now, and people are struggling and depressed and anxiety and very alone. I think what I want to unpack is, if you would have had the ALS diagnosis back when you were Darth Vader, how would that experience hit you compared to when it did? Because back then you were very driven because of anger, and then when it actually did hit you, you were very driven more from positive stuff, like I need to be here for my family, I need to be here for my wife. If you would have had that same diagnosis back when you were in the Ranger Battalion and you were driven by anger, how do you think that would have affected you?
I don't think it would have gone well. I don't think it would have gone well at all. I did face some life-threatening stuff there, but it would not have gone well. This would not have gone well.
Yeah.
We don't accept weakness when we're fueled by anger, right? Because when we're fueled by anger, then the only thing we have is our strength. So when you lose that strength, all of a sudden now that anger has nowhere to go. When you are fueled by an outside source, then the weakness becomes just as much an opportunity as the strength. Your ability and willingness to stay strong and navigate through weaknesses in your life, all of a sudden, they're just as impactful to those around you as if you were fully strong.
Yeah.
You still are having an impact. So when you're in that dark space and these things hit you, it takes you down harder because you are relying on your strength. That is what you have.
Yeah.
And when that's lost, you really lose your way.
Yeah.
But your life is bigger than you. People are as inspired. In fact, people are more inspired by what you do in your weakness than by what you do in your strength. We're not impressed when somebody like you or I do something that is maybe a little bit outside the ordinary. People go, okay, that's cool. That's Ara and Dustin. But when we see somebody that's new, that's younger, that's more frail, that is not in a condition that we wouldn't expect, and they step up and do the extraordinary, that inspires us.
Oh, yeah.
That's what really makes it hit home.
Yeah.
Our strength is not what necessarily inspires people. It's what we have done in our weakness that has led to that strength that inspires other people to say, yeah, I can do it too. And that's what would have been missing back then. That's what's missing with many folks now, I think. your strength is not your greatest attribute.
Yeah.
It's actually your ability to handle weakness. That's what will lead your family. That's what will lead those around you. That's what will draw people to you to have an impact. It's that even in the moments of trial, you're still able to keep moving forward and you're not quitting. That mindset, while you may think you're not making a difference, that mindset is what changes your impact on the world around you. So for those that right now are in the darkest of times, I would say, again, don't look at the fact that you've lost your strength. That's okay. Look at how you are going to now maximize your ability within the range of your weakness, because that is where you are going to see people are going to really need you right now. Yeah. It's your ability to stand strong in the midst of that weakness. All the hero stories we hear are from people that did amazing things in the underdog, in amazingly difficult circumstances, because they rose above their circumstances. Yeah. I don't know that I would have rose above it as Darth Vader. Yeah. Darth Vader was fueled by anger. You're not likely to rise above it. It had to come later in life, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I wanted to make sure we talked about that because we've seen that effect hit really hard this year. And I think it was probably worse this year than ever just because of all the external circumstances. But we, with Mountain Tough, we have a lot of, young individuals that are trying to go through different types of selections and different type of military schools. Yeah. And I think with all of the extra external circumstances this year, any sort of injury or any sort of rollback seemed to just be devastating, where, if I was driven to get through that just because I wanted to be the strongest, most baddest guy, or if I was driven because of anger, an injury could devastate someone or cause a lot of issues. And so how do you think people should make that transition from being driven by anger to being more positively driven?
It's an easy one to talk about. It's harder to do. So again, from my faith case, came back to my faith. But I think a big part of it is, so you get derailed, right? Yeah. Your expectation was this. And then it turns out that for whatever reason, this didn't happen. I ended up here. Or in my mind, I ended up here, right? I fell short. Yeah. That's because your expectation is that you were going to be the next SEAL Team 6 commander. You're going to be the next Airborne Ranger. That you were going to do that thing. Yeah. Okay, that didn't work out. So that strength, which was the outcome of I'm going to prove everybody, my own mind, wrong from whatever happened to me that stole my confidence and stole my security. Yeah. I'm going to make that back by becoming this guy. Okay, that guy didn't happen. That now forces you to say, okay, but your impact hasn't changed. What it's going to force you to do is go back and face that thing. Mm-hmm. Why are you doing what you're doing? Was it to become the best Navy SEAL because you wanted to lead SEALs in combat and be a great leader, or was it because you were trying to make up for something in your past? Mm-hmm. If you're trying to make up for something in the past, then that's a demon that you can work through. It may be that you need to get a coach to work you through it. Yeah. It may be that you need to talk to somebody close to you to work through the emotional scars, like that dog, right? It's got those scars. We got to deal with those emotional scars. But that does not mean that your future has been derailed. Mm-hmm. It just means that your confidence in your strength is now gone. But when you pivot, you will find that there's another thing you can do that will actually take your experience from the past and positively use it to help others in the present. When I went through my Jonah the Bell the Whale thing, I wrote down 3 alternatives for myself. Yeah. A, get bitter and never go back into the environments I had left. B, I can't remember what the second one was, but the third one was to build something that would make such a difference to other people that had followed a similar journey to me, that would be able to be an inspiration for them to find a place of comfort as they navigated their journey. Yeah. You have the option of doing number 3. You are either going to stay where you're at and really, really, really be miserable in where you're at, or you're going to say, okay, I don't want I want to become somebody that helps other people that have struggled with the same kind of thing I'm struggling with. So I'm going to deal with my demons. And because I know that once I do that, I'm going to find a path that will now build something that can turn around and help the guy behind me. Yeah. You have what people don't realize is that negative experience in life is actually a strength. You have something that other people don't. You have an experience that other people don't have. I can talk to certain people because I have certain experiences, but there's some things I can't share with them. You have experiences in life that are unique to you, and you can make a connection with people that are going through the same thing you went through that I cannot reach. When you realize that, then you'll realize that that horrible event and the things in your life that caused you so much angst are actually your strength, not to fuel you to become the best Navy SEAL in the world necessarily, but it now fuels you to realize you have a connection with people that others do not, and you can have a bigger impact on them than someone like me or somebody else could ever have. There's some folks I deal with that are coming out of some serious alcoholism or, again, the drug addiction, and I watch them navigate, and it's like, listen, you have a connection now to people behind you. You know what it's like to have been addicted. You know what it's like when that addiction hits. You know what it's like when that pain hits. You know what it's like when the DTs hit. You have an experience that can speak a language I cannot speak. This is going to become your strength. You're going to get through this, and now you're going to turn around and you watch. You're going to impact so many people behind you who cannot be impacted by me because I haven't walked their road, but you have. And that, to me, has been a huge determiner on whether you turn the corner from your previous experience being baggage to your previous experience being now a molding event. It either makes you better or bitter. It becomes a molding event. I know that I can do something with this. It will become one of your greatest strengths.
Yeah, it's a game changer. I actually watched it with my dad growing up, and your point was so accurate from that lens. So my parents got divorced because my mom had an addiction. So of course there's the major year of trauma where all that comes out and all that's dealt with. And it led my dad to go to Alcoholics Anonymous. So not because he had the addiction, but because she did. And he went there because he wanted to understand, how can people have these addictions? What causes it? How can I navigate through it? And that was a cool experience because we watched how that helped him heal. But that was about 20 years ago. Well, it was 24 years ago. And he's been part of Alcoholics Anonymous ever since. So he goes to AA meetings 4 to 5 times a week. He's gone for 24 years, and he goes 4 or 5 times a week, not because he's still looking for a ton of healing. It's because he's helping every single new person that comes in. And so now if I look at it, I mean, he's helped thousands of people because of the experience he went through, but he had to make the decision, am I going to let this ruin me, or am I going to use this to help a whole bunch more people?
That's the difference. T.D. Jakes is a great quote. Nothing in your life is ever wasted, and it never is. So sometimes what we consider to be the worst thing in our life, and it probably is, God can use as a strength. It can become the thing that now turns around and becomes, it becomes the thing that you build on. But unfortunately, you have to turn the anger and turn the corner on the anger and the discouragement and the lack of confidence that comes from it. And sometimes that's easier to do than others. Sometimes you might need some help getting down that road, getting a more healthy view of it. It's not that it ever gets better necessarily. It's not like you just get over it and move on. In fact, it never works that way. Again, it's that dog, right? The dog thought it was good, but it didn't move on. It couldn't move on. It just had to get a healthier perspective on, if there's a suitcase in the house, that doesn't mean I'm losing my master, right? It had to gain that healthy perspective. It didn't change the trauma of the event. It didn't mean that the trauma wasn't real and that it wasn't painful for the dog. It was, and to negate that would be foolish. that's a real emotional experience, and it's very valid. But getting it into a healthier perspective is what allows it to become now a tool in the kit bag versus a weight in your rucksack.
Yeah.
And I think that's that healthy corner turn, which again, sometimes we can do ourselves and sometimes we need some help.
Yeah, that's super helpful.
Hope so.
Thanks, Ara. I think that really helped answer my questions for today about that long-term mindset, long-term mental toughness, doing things you're proud of for the long haul. I think we can talk about mental toughness forever.
Yeah, probably.
So we'll probably wrap up for today and talk more about it soon.
Cool.